Hi G Session viewers, my name is Alyssa Kritzman and I'm the design director of the G Project. For those of you who are new here, welcome, and those of you who are coming back for more, we're so excited to have you. The G Project is a public art campaign focused on dismantling negative ideas about immigrants. And the way that we're doing this is by inviting people to tell their own stories and ask the big question, what is your G status? So the G status really identifies your generation. For example, mine is G1 on my father's side, and I'm a G2 on my mom's side. This means that my father came from elsewhere, and my mom was born in the United States, but her parents came from elsewhere. Through each session, we've invited different guests to accompany them with a personal artifact, piece of music, they can recite a poem, anything that really conveys their own story and heritage. So this season, for season 3, we've invited previous guests to actually be the host and invite their own family members or circle of friends, colleagues, whatever they may be, to them to interview them. And this month, during March, we will be celebrating an all-female lineup to empower and encourage women to tell their stories all month long for Women's History Month. So I hope you tune in every Wednesday at 4 p.m. And at the end of this video, my colleague Richard Pelzer will give you some information as to how you can follow us and where to keep up with everything that's going on. So I hope you enjoy, and without further ado, please welcome our next guest.
Hello. My name is Lorna Harris, and I am the executive producer of Immigrants Are Us, the Generation Project. I am a G7, and I am really, really thrilled to introduce our special guest today, Sung Uni Lee. And we are connected. Hi, Sung. We are connected through generations. My daughter, I'm a G7. My daughter is a G8, and her daughter is a G9, my granddaughter. And how I know Sung is through the generations of my daughter and her daughter. So Sung is really welcome to the G session today, and it's really, really great to see you. And I'm really going to turn this over to you. Like, what have you been up to since I've seen you last? Tell us who you are and all of that type of thing.
Okay. Well, I'm an artist. Particularly, I focus on culinary arts. So my company is called Cooperative Kitchen. I'm using food as a framework to talk about our personal experience, how we create food, where the culture of food comes from. And really what I'd like to do is help people feel comfortable about making food for themselves, nurturing themselves, healing themselves. But also, I see this as like now a very important way of building community. So for instance, Leah and Annie would come over to our house quite often for food. And that is the way that we start to build experiences together. Even the idea of like doing collective work, whether it's you're going to bring a salad to the meal or you're going to help do the dishes, is kind of a way to build community. It's active and it's participatory. So but yeah, we've had a kismet ever since we moved into the neighborhood half a block from Leah and Annie. And since then, and even before then, the girls have been friends, and it's been
right since elementary school.
Yes, yeah. And I love to see actually the 3 generations of your family together. Like just,
yes.
I remember one time you drove by and you were in a car all together, and just kind of seeing the maps of your faces, the genetic code that passed through is just like such a experience. Yeah. So one of the things since the pandemic, since we're coming up to a year of the pandemic, at the very end of March of last year, I left New York City with this idea that it might be temporary or it might be permanent type of move, I moved into my mother's home in Wilmington, Delaware. And but once I arrived, I realized that she being on her own and me having this kind of a sort of a looser schedule, having created my own business and having that kind of flexibility allowed me to be able to become her partial caretaker. She's independent, but just, being on her own, I think she was quite lonely. I was actually kind of lonely too. I felt a little tethered, and moving into the house together, the 3 generations of women living together has been a very unique and quite phenomenal experience, and something that I'm really, really grateful for. And maybe maybe if it wasn't for the pandemic, it wouldn't have pushed us into that kind of edge, because there was points of discomfort too, like generational, cultural, personal, a lot of family history, a lot of past, a lot of like projections. So what I spent the year doing on a personal level or on a spiritual level was to try to practice presence. Why are we here together? What are the lessons we're getting from each other? How can we eke joy out of a very simple thing like a meal, or growing a little, I know we grow these like a squash plant that like
yes.
kind of look a monster. So yeah, I've been very grateful for the past year. It's been very eye-opening on a practical level to really have to practice, the things that I've been studying.
So with this being Women's History Month,
sure,
it's very, very significant. I hear of 3 generations of women being together. And as you know, my children, my granddaughter and my daughter, I'm very close to them, and we talk to each other all the time, and we get to practice the 3 generational thing. But I find having teenagers in my life right now has been very challenging, and I know that must be challenging for your mother. As well, because we come from a different time, and I come from a culture that came from the South, and you came from a different type of culture. So this leads us into, what is your G status? Like, who are you?
Okay, so my family immigrated all together as one kind of unit. So I'm technically a G0, I guess, but I kind of because I was born in Korea.
Okay.
I moved to the United States when I was about 6 years old.
Okay.
I'm the oldest child of 4 children. So my brother was like, held by my plane, and all of us, the other children, we had older cousins that moved with us. So we took the journey of like being on the plane for the first time with this feeling of support, because our family was integrated. However, the reason I feel like I'm in between, because even though I'm like really the first generation immigrant, not a G1, but it's G0, because I lost part of my mother tongue. So in other words, I'm not fluent in Korean. I can speak it as if I'm 3, 4, 5 with like base languaging, very practical languaging, like do this, do that, food. But I don't have my mother tongue is a little bit lost. So to me, I kind of feel like I'm in between the generations. And so I consider myself a bridge.
Okay.
Yeah.
So as a bridge, how do you cross over? Do you often cross over? Because bridges take us from one place to another.
Sure. And sometimes bridges can go out.
Yeah.
or there's a heaven to
That's
on
true.
it. Like New York City bridges are just too expensive. But I, what I think I'm in a very interesting place because Korea itself went through its own cultural growth at the time
Mhm.
I wasn't living there, if that makes sense. So
Mhm.
in Korean culture, they advanced somewhere from like within 50 years, they had gone through like almost multiple iterations of their revolution. So, like for instance, a Korean grandmother in Korea had a cell phone before she ever had a pager,
Wow.
machine, maybe even a landline, if that makes sense.
Uh-huh.
So they were kind of in the 50s,
Advanced.
60s, yeah, that they were third world. And then they quickly, like,
Wow.
the United States presence also quickly moved them into like a more modern generation. So, a way of being. So, right now, even if you went to Korea, you would experience as a more modern city or country than you might even in the United States. Whereas for me, the culture shock happened very young, and it happened in the context of having to move into this space.
Mhm.
So I have a lot of very uh, important memories, feelings of
Mhm.
nostalgia around food. My memories from Korea, the earth-based culture that was like the original Korean culture. Even the religion was more Buddhist, Confucianism. It was more, yeah, like plant agricultural based, shaman ritual. So,
Mhm.
we use those kinds of things. Whereas um, now, like, K-pop and Korean culture is like
Yes.
very flipped. So you, I think that like the world's perception of Korea is a little bit different than my perception of Korea. My perception of Korea is from 45 years ago, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, I remember seeing Black Panther. And those scenes when they went to Korea, I was like, wow, I was amazed. It really like this is what
Yeah.
Korea's like, and I really want to go there.
Yes. 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 Yeah. Well, there a lot of there's very hospitable, very gregarious people. Um, and I think it's interesting because I don't even know Korea in its more modern sense. Yeah.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
but so the way that I'm trying to bridge the cultures is that
Yes.
I have some remembering and some experiences from traditional ways of being. For instance, I'll speak about the art of making kimchi. Kimchi is a fermented food,
Mhm.
Korean culture.
Love it.
I'll bring you a bottle next time.
Oh, good.
Um, so traditional way of making kimchi is that there's a harvest and usually in the fall, and like all the women folk gather together and they make kimchi together. It's called a kimjang. It's actually a specific word in Korean
Wow.
describes that.
So it's a ritual, a
Yeah,
tradition.
it's a communal way of preparing food. So then it's labor intensive, right? And so
Mhm.
everybody like kind of takes on tasks, and then at the end of the day you end up taking your cachet of kimchi home.
Mhm. 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 Mhm.
So I I want to almost revive that in this culture because now everybody knows what kimchi is, right?
Yes.
And people are interested in making it. Sometimes I buy them at the store and I don't feel quite satisfied. Like, also
Right.
cooking and my work is dealing with sort of holistic health aspects of food and eating. So when I have store bought anything, I always feel like I'm missing that human quality in the food.
Mhm.
It's
Mhm.
more of a feeling. It's not necessarily the taste, but I experience it as a taste. Like there's some kind of authenticity, some kind of depth in
Mm-hmm.
food, and especially when you make food specifically for people, with those people resting in your heart, it comes.
Yes. So it's very soul satisfying.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well, I kind of want to pivot and ask, because of what's going on in current events,
Sure.
if you have any feelings or would you like to share anything about what's going on in the Asian and Pacific Island population?
Well, I had a very dramatic experience when in the beginning of the pandemic, when someone noticed me boarding a plane, and I felt the same feeling that I used to feel when I used to like
Mm-hmm.
to Philadelphia, which was to be noticed because I'm
Yeah.
different, because I'm yellow or whatever. But for me personally, I've had to go through so many evolutions of like becoming myself that I can pull back a lot. I can
Mm-hmm.
see
Mm-hmm.
the situation from far away, and maybe partially because I grew up in Philadelphia, but my identity is with the people who are on the margins overall in general. And so I understand there's a specific attack on a group of people, but I think it's just part of the whole massive
Yes.
marginalization of all peoples outside of the main,
Mm-hmm.
like the people who are trying to stay in power, control, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I I almost felt like it kind of took us away from the attention that I like to put on back on Black Lives Matter issues, because like it was like the fire had started, but we still haven't really seen such dramatic results. And in the way that we liberate each other, it liberates everyone.
Yes.
Yeah, I believe in the energy field more than
Mm-hmm.
my own individual experience. So um, I think it's really sad. I also feel like it's interesting that mass shootings
Mm-hmm.
restarted up after a year of like the pandemic. After,
Pandemic. Mm-hmm.
no, there wasn't that kind of aggravation because we had found this common enemy. And now that it's sort of loosening up, I find it so debilitating to think about how
Yeah.
that aggravation is coming back out, you know?
Right. Well, thank you for your honesty and for sharing that with us, because the awareness is so important.
Yeah.
And now, with that said, we're coming towards the end of our one-on-one conversation already.
I know.
So, did you bring anything to share with us?
Well, I didn't have like too much heirlooms, but I just found this thing because I'm writing a book about memories of my
You're
father.
writing a book.
Yes. So, and it has a lot to do with the things that I touched upon, but this is the our our family got naturalized all together, although I don't think we
Ah,
ceremony.
everybody?
Yeah, because I was 12 years old, and I think it was mostly for adults.
Mm-hmm.
So here it says, this is the brochure for the induction ceremony after we got our citizenship, and it happened on October 3rd, 1979. So it was
Wow.
my birthday.
That's
And
very special.
yeah, and the other funny thing is that actually my mom told me that when she was pregnant with me, this is going back to the idea of like shamanistic culture or earth-based cultures. The shaman told her that the baby that was in her stomach, which was me, that I was holding the energy to move us out of Korea.
Oh, Sang.
It's sort of our destiny to be,
Yes.
or fate, I don't know, or some kind of astral projection.
So
Or,
here you are.
yeah, yeah.
Here you are.
Yeah, so I find my purpose of being the bridge to be perhaps the reason that I'm here. You know, I find a lot of purpose in that.
Well, thank you so much for being a guest.
And
And I really appreciate it. And I know our audience has learned a lot. And I'm going to hold you to my kimchi jar.
I am definitely going to bring you a jar or two.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, again, Sung, Uni Lee, and we didn't get into the Uni part, but that's for another conversation.
Absolutely.
Thank you again, everyone, for being with the G sessions today. Bye-bye.
Great to see you. Bye.
Bye. Mwah. Love you.
Wow, what a great story. Thank you very much for sharing. My name is Richard Pelzer. I'm the Director of Communications and Marketing for the G Project. As Alyssa Chrisman mentioned in the beginning, we are a public art project. I would love to invite everyone to our website, which is gproject.org. And I ask you to please sign up for all of our social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, and now this new YouTube channel. If you are new to our YouTube channel, I ask everyone to please subscribe right there below. And we would love to actually hear any comments. So please catch us every Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for a new story. And we ask you to please share your project. And we ask the question, what is your G status? Thank you very much for watching. We'll see you soon.